Welcome, fellow heretics and hive scum, to today's episode where we'll stroll down memory lane right into the blood-soaked mess that was the first Space Marine game. But before we begin, let's reintroduce you to our hero, Demetrian Titus. Yep, you heard that right. Titus has a first name. Who knew? Anyway, Titus hails from Ultramar, the galaxy's equivalent of a gated suburb community, and home to the Ultramarines, who love to remind everyone that amongst the Space Marine chapters, they're the shit. Young Titus was plucked from obscurity and tossed into the meat grinder, eventually joining the second company. Now, somewhere along the way, Titus befriended two Ultramarines of varying degrees of usefulness, Sergeant Sidonus, who's the kind of guy you'd want as a college roommate. And then there's Leandros, a bitch-ass snitch. These two chumps stick around long enough for Titus to get promoted to captain of the second company. Anyway, this is where we dive straight into the lore of the first Space Marine game. The story kicks off with the orc invasion of the Forge world of Graia, led by none other than Warboss Grimskull. Grimskull had a cunning plan, which, let's be honest, is rare for a species that thinks painting something red makes it go faster. He set his beady red eyes on Graia because they churn out titans. These things are a wet dream for any orc warband looking to up their game. The initial assault went better than expected, which for orcs usually means they didn't blow themselves up within the first 5 minutes. But instead of the usual smash and bash, Grimskull actually showed some self-control, unheard of, I know, and focused on capturing these war robots. This move alone proved Grimskull wasn't a numbskull. Graia was getting absolutely destroyed, and they sent out an SOS. Being a prime piece of real estate in the Imperium's portfolio, everyone wanted a piece of the action. Naturally, the Ultramarines, who've practically trademarked being the goats of the Imperium, were quick to flex. But plot twist, the 203rd Cadian Regiment actually showed up first. Unsurprisingly, the Cadians got steamrolled, leaving them in desperate need of a respawn. That's when the Ultramarines made their grand entrance with Captain Demetrian Titus at the helm, oozing main character energy like Tom Cruise. Titus touched down with his ride-or-die Sidonus and the ever-useless Leandros on Grimskull's ship. Captain Titties went full solo mode and wrecked the ship like a boss. After that, the squad stumbled upon what was left of the Cadian guardsmen, who had somehow managed to hold off millions of orcs for weeks. Titus and his merry band decided to give them a hand by yeeting the orc-controlled orbital gun straight to the warp, making way for some much-needed backup from the Imperium. The Ultramarines were still out there kicking ass, strategizing how to reclaim any titans still standing. That's when they ran into this sketchy dude named Inquisitor Drogan, who dropped the bomb that there was some kind of device on the planet siphoning energy straight from the warp. So, Titus rolled out to grab this warp battery, only to find Grimskull lurking around like a younger sibling with ADHD. Grimskull didn't give two shits about the device at first, but the moment he saw Titus eyeballing it, he was all in. Plus, it was shiny, and we all know how orcs are with anything that glitters. Good old Grimskull, bless his simple destructive heart, managed to obliterate the generator room while chasing after the shiny object. In the chaos, Captain Titus got separated from his Ultramarine bros. But hey, silver lining, Captain Titty snagged that warp-powered gizmo, so it's not all bad news. After a dramatic reunion with Inquisitor Drogan, he's surprised as he sees Titus casually handling the power source like it's a fidget spinner. Given that it's radiating warp energy strong enough to vaporize or corrupt a normal person, Drogan's surprise is understandable. And then Drogan, being the sketchy character he is, finally spills the beans. He's been cooking up something called the Psychic Scourge, a device that, when juiced up with the power source, could literally blow the brains out of specific xenospecies. Drogan figures it's their best shot at surviving this orc invasion. The gang fought their way to Drogan's sketchy lab, where they hooked up the power source to the Psychic Scourge, ready to unleash hell, or so they thought. Just as the weapon was about to do its thing, Grimskull and his crew crashed the party. The Scourge went off, and instead of the glorious brain-blasting fireworks they were expecting, the orcs just got a bit woozy. But then, plot twist. A chaos portal ripped open. Out stepped Chaos Lord Nemeroth, followed by a bunch of bloodletters who immediately started turning the orcs into chunky pesto salsa. Meanwhile, Grimskull got yeeted off a ledge. Nemeroth walked up to Drogan, and it turned out everyone had been played. Surprise, motherfuckers! Nemeroth had pulled a fast one. He'd sent a demon to possess Drogan, and while the Space Marines thought they were getting rid of the orcs, they were actually helping to recalibrate the Scourge into a chaos portal opener. Nemeroth decided it was time to give Captain Titty the one-way ticket to the afterlife. But just as he's about to begin the final boss fight, who should claw his way back from the abyss but Grimskull? He's back, bitches. Grimskull drags Nemeroth into a round of fisticuffs, and they both end up plummeting right back into the same pit Grimskull had just escaped from. Titus and his team seize the moment to regroup. They hatch a wild plan to supercharge a Titan with the power source. The idea was to use the Titan's massive cannon to take down the spire that's keeping the warp portal open. As they hacked and slashed their way through the endless waves of enemies, Titus runs into Grimskull one last time. But this time, he ends it for real. Titus simply puts a bolter round right through Grimskull's thick skull, ending his storyline with a bang. Rest in peace to the realest orc. Eventually, the heroes manage to pull off the win, supercharging the Titan and obliterating the pillar holding up the Chaos Portal, leaving Nemeroth and his minions stranded. With the portal down and the forces of Chaos cut off, the Imperial Liberation Forces rolled in, guns blazing, ready to mop up whatever was left of the Chaos riffraff on Graia. Titus, never one to miss out on a good old-fashioned brawl, was all set to dive back into the action. But first, he asked his bro Sidonus to Uber the power source back to Ultramar. Just when you thought it was all wrapped up, Nemeroth emerges from a portal and murders Sidonus. The worst part, he swiped the power source for himself. Nemeroth decided it was time for his glow-up and began his dramatic transformation into a demon prince. But Titus was not having it. Still salty that his buddy Sidonus got wrecked, Titus confronted Nemeroth. Armed with nothing more than a chainsword and a bolt pistol, Titus threw himself into the fight. No special weapons, no fancy relics, just the raw audacity of a man who looked at a demon prince and thought, yeah, I can take him. And take him he did. For a solid 5 minutes, Titus went full berserker mode, wailing on Nemeroth. The mad lad ripped the demon prince's head clean off with his bare hands. That mofo was built different. Just as Titus was basking in the afterglow of his victory, the Inquisition arrives. But they weren't there to hand Titus a medal or even a nice, thanks for saving the universe, bro. Nope. They came to arrest his ass. Why? Well, because someone, let's call him Leandros, aka Captain Snitch, decided to tattle to the Inquisition. Apparently, Titus's whole I'm immune to corruption thing during Nemeroth's evil TED Talk and his casual use of the power source raised some serious eyebrows. So that's how Space Marine 1 wraps up. There's a gap of 200 years in between the first and second game. In that time frame, Titus is held captive and tortured by the Inquisition under suspicion of being chaos corrupted. He's proven innocent and joins the Death Watch, but things go south on one mission and he's almost killed. The only way to save him was to turn him into a primarch Space Marine. Eventually, he rejoins the Ultramarines as a lieutenant. Space Marine 2 is where we pick up the story. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. If there's any specific 40K lore, topics, or conversations you'd like me to discuss, please feel free to drop a comment below.